And we are recording. Rafe Kelley, thanks for being on Fitness and Consciousness.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. It's great to be here.
Um, I'm going to start with uh, a game that Matt Scholl, who you met at one of your workshops, he's the owner of White Pine Wilderness Academy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a wilderness survival awareness school. And that's where I teach my strength and conditioning classes for kids and adults. And uh, So I'm going to start off by telling you this game that his dad was born in India. His grandfather was a shikari, which is a government job. It means tracker. That was my Bluetooth. It was a government job, and his grandpa had to like track and kill the man-eating cats in India, and there would be like a small village where the cats might kill 3 to 5 people per week. And so, and his grandpa did this for 20 years. So this is a game that they used to play, and the game leads to a question. That's why I'm starting off with this.
Sounds good.
So the game is from the Dangs district in India, where my father was born. Was called Suli, S-U-L-I. They would play in these huge spanning walking trees or banyan trees. The climbers could climb from limb to limb as high as they wanted, and the protectors were on the ground protecting a series of objects. Sorry, it was just messed up on my screen here. So the climbers could climb from limb to limb as high as they wanted, and the protectors were on the ground protecting a series of objects. The climbers would try to get to an object and get it to the top of the tree without being tagged. If the protectors tag a climber, the climber would become a protector. The protectors could climb only when in pursuit of the object. In other words, if the object made it to the tree, they could climb in pursuit of it, but not if the object was still on the ground. Similar to capoeira, a very advanced game with high levels of risk that would be played for kids 6 and up for hours at a time. My question is, to what extent do you recognize the difference in physical and cognitive development between the developing world and the first world, and how are these differences affecting us culturally?
So a couple things that pop up around my head is maybe a lot of the audience has seen the movie Ong Bak.
Yes.
Ong Bak has an initial scene where I think there's a prize at the top of a tree, and a bunch of young athletes have to run up into the tree, and they're covered in mud, and then they're kicking each other and knocking each other out of the tree. So that's the image that popped into my head.
I remember.
I had a hard time. Yeah, I was having a hard time kind of understanding exactly the mechanics of the game. The basic idea, as far as I can tell, is that there's a capture the flag or capture the object game that takes place in a tree. And then, of course, obviously this has risk, and it requires high levels of coordination and strength and ability to tolerate taking a fall. And the fact that games like this were played traditionally in many, many cultures indicates just how physically robust these people are and how tolerant of risk they are. One of the games that I think is one of the most profound and valuable games that's widely popular across the world is capoeira. Capoeira. I had a conversation many years ago with a Cirque du Soleil recruiter, and at the time, I was really interested in the definitions of fitness that have been put out by CrossFit. And one of the CrossFit ideas was that gymnasts learn sports faster than other athletes. And I thought that that was a really interesting observation. And I came from a gymnastics background. I thought there was some truth to it. But I thought that the stuff that I saw people doing in CrossFit that was from gymnastics didn't really get the point of what was good about gymnastics. I didn't think that doing more pull-ups and more dips and more push-ups and more hollow body rocks was going to get you the thing that separated gymnasts from other athletes. I thought it really had to do with their ability to handle complexity, right? Going from, okay, if you're in CrossFit, it's like You can do so many you can do a pull-up. Okay, that's step one. Now can you do more pull-ups? That's step two. Now can you do more pull-ups faster? That's step three. And then it kind of ends there. But if you're a gymnast, like a pull-up isn't even the point. The point is to be able to swing around the bar and do complex tricks. And once you learn a complex trick, so okay, you do a pull-up, which becomes a pullover. That's a more complex movement. And then the pullover is actually part of the pathway towards learning a giant. So then you go baby giants, and then you go giants. And then from giants, which is a swing completely around the bar, then you can work on forward giants and backwards giants. You can work on switching, like switching hand positions, different hand positions, spinning, in-bar work, and releases. So you're constantly leveling up complexity. And that challenge to the nervous system is essentially what you're going to experience anytime that you go into a new movement art. So what separated gymnastics from traditional strength and conditioning athletes or athletes from a team sport background is this intentional layering of complexity, always doing something more complex. So I was talking to the Cirque du Soleil recruiter about why that was valuable. And he was saying, it's true that the gymnasts learn sports pretty fast, but in his experience, they weren't the fastest. Like parkour athletes and free runners were just as fast. And actually the fastest athletes to learn new sports were capoeiristas. And I thought that was really interesting. And I thought about that for a while. And the thing that I came up with was that capoeira is, it contains the complexity that gymnastics has. But whereas gymnastics is volitional, you decide precisely the set of the set of things that you're going to do, and then you do them. And if you didn't do them right, then you basically you messed up. Capoeira is reactive. You create things in the moment in relationship to a complex changing environment. And this is really more like what life is like. So, and you do that in relationship specifically to music and to a partner who you're moving in both a cooperative and a competitive way. And so and then you have all sorts of strength acrobatic movements as well. So if you look at someone who's a capoeirista, they have the ability to move to music. They have the ability to move with a partner cooperatively, with a partner competitively. They have the ability to be elastic and bounce and flow off the ground. They have the ability to be strong in their upper body, and they have the ability to move reactively as opposed to volitionally. And this is hugely key in being an adaptive athlete. So this is all a long preamble to answering your question, but what I would say is that the capoeira is one of the keystone systems that you as a movement athlete can take in and really grab the benefits of. But the problem is that it's taught as a system generally in a way that's appropriate for third world people and not for first world people. It's really designed, the pedagogy is designed around, I would say it's designed for Brazilian street kids. These are kids who are embodied in a body-oriented culture, a movement-oriented culture, where they're dancing, where people are moving to music constantly, where people are learning music, where people are physically active and engaged in rough and tumble play and fighting. Like they get hit and they have to be tough, and their culture tells them that they have to be tough and they can't be fragile. So like they don't have an expectation of being like taken care of at every step of a process. They see something that they like and they're going to try it. And the pedagogy of capoeira is like, we're going to do back handsprings today. And it's like everybody in the group is just expected to do back handsprings. And if you're not ready, then you're going to fall down and hurt yourself, and you're going to get up and keep trying it because you got to be tough. And that does work if you're working with like spry, young 10-year-olds who grew up on the streets of Brazil. But if you're working with 40-year-old overweight office workers in the United States, it really doesn't work. Yeah. So there is this huge difference between the experience of being in a body that comes from a culture that's non-sedentary, and they can handle these things that seem literally impossible to us. They seem like feats of magic, right? Mm-hmm. Like thinking that it would be fun to play a game where you're 20 feet up in a tree and someone's going to try to kick you out of the tree. That's incomprehensible to a modern Westerner. And maybe it doesn't have to be incomprehensible to a human. Maybe a human being can be that robust, can be that strong. but we're not feeding ourselves with the necessary nourishments to attain that level of strength in our body. And that strength in the body, it's not just the body. It's something that has major impacts across the entirety of the human being, because we have this Cartesian duality between body and mind that's at the center of Western culture, but it's a false duality. The mind is not complete without the body, right? If people talk about, you could get a brain transplant, you could take your brain out and put it in another body, but if you cut off your brain out of your body, you're cutting off half your nervous system. You're cutting off everything like that. That nervous system is continuous down through the spine. It's continuous into the enteric nervous system and the gut. And there's emotional information that's encoded in the tissues that's going back into the brain. There's evidence, like if you get a heart transplant, people get heart transplants. There's tons of nerves in the heart. So that heart, it's not just tissue. It's actually a little piece of another person's mind that's been pushed into your body. And so people who get heart transplants, they start having emotional responses to things that they wouldn't. They start having cravings that they didn't have beforehand, because it's not just tissue, and we don't realize that. So we think that we can kind of perform optimally as minds and just let our bodies be brain taxis. And if they can kind of half function and get us around, we think that we've done enough. And I think that's a fundamentally mistaken idea. I think that if you're not strong in the body, that courage of the mind will not come easily to you. That if you're fragile in your body, that fragility of ego will be more likely for you. Now, I don't think that strengthening the body does everything that is necessary to make someone moral and strong and intelligent by any means. But I think that you can't divorce the physicality from the mind and expect to function optimally. So that was a very, very long answer to the question, but hopefully a very useful one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it seems like they're just changing now. When I was a kid, we would go and grade school, we'd go. You don't even have to call your friends or anything. You just go. We'd where we'd meet, and we'd play football, and then we'd play basketball, and then we'd play tennis, and then we'd wrestle, and then we'd box, and then we'd play just every kind of sport we could think of, climbing trees and riding bikes and racing and running and just anything we could think of, all in one day. And now it's like the kids are they're playing video games all the time. It doesn't seem like they go outside as much. And
how old are you, Ryan?
What's that?
How old are you?
39.
39, okay. So you're a couple years older than me. I felt like I was the last kid in the woods in my generation. So I'm 36. And I, up until about, let's say maybe around 10 years old, me and most of my friends did all that stuff. We were riding our bikes all the time. We were climbing trees. We were wrestling with each other and fighting. And we built, we made swords out of PVC pipe wrapped in pipe insulation, wrapped in duct tape, and had fights with that. And we had an apple orchard in my backyard. And so we'd have apple wars where we'd throw apples at each other and play apple baseball, all this stuff. Yeah. And then right around, say, 10 years old, it was everybody got a Nintendo. Yeah. And all of a sudden, people just, the kids around me just didn't want to go outside anymore. They were too busy playing Mario Kart or whatever was the video game of the moment. And I just never was interested in that personally very much. And I felt like I lost out on so much development as a human being because there wasn't a tribe to support continuing to grow physically. And then a few years later, most of my friends started smoking marijuana, and that made them even more useless. They just, so yeah, there's even between, say, you, 3 years older than me, and me, at 36, and maybe it's different also where are you from? Maybe you're from where are you from?
Originally from a small town in Indiana called Shelbyville.
Yeah.
And then now I live in Indianapolis, pretty close to downtown.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. So maybe in Indianapolis or in Indiana, it was the cultural shift was a little bit later too. But I felt like I could see when it happened, right? When the generation went from being kids who played outside to not, and I think that we currently are in the West the weakest generation of human beings that has ever existed, and not just in the West. I was just in China recently, and the level of physicality there in young people is maybe worse than it is here. Like they've adopted so much of the kind of structure of the way that post-industrial society works from the West that they've lost the movement part of their culture even more, which is really tragic because they had such a profound movement culture. So we look at kids who grew up with Nintendo, who are in their 30s now, and they're the most unhealthy generation of 30-year-olds ever. But then the kids who come up to the next generation, the first kids who grew up with the internet.
Yeah.
And the kids who are coming up in the next generation, the first kids who grew up with tablets that they could start playing video games on them before they could type or write, where they're stuck in their screen world by the time they're, say, 5 years old, and they're interfacing with that more than they're interfacing with material reality. And I think that it's setting us up for some enormous problems. I think we really don't know just how disconnected we are and how destructive that is for human beings. We have epidemics like depression, anxiety, and suicide are all going up. Obviously, obesity is a huge problem, and I think that's all going to continue. And I think this whole safe space generation is basically kids who never got enough, got pushed around, got physical enough, got robust enough to be able to handle being challenged. And so they want to be protected in the way that they were when they were, playing with their screen when they were 6 years old, and
protected from words,
protected from anything that makes them uncomfortable, because they've never been uncomfortable, and being uncomfortable is profoundly overwhelming for people who've never had to deal with it.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is like what Matt was alluding to in the question, or more than alluding to, was so in like Brazil, a lot of it's still very poor, and so these kids don't have a Nintendo, so they go outside. What's going on? Well, all their friends are doing capoeira, they're doing jiu-jitsu, and they might not have a nice new mat to practice on. They might have the dirt. They might have the concrete. They have they don't have all their sharp edges with covered up with something soft. So you think that like that's kind of like part of it, why they're still able to do these things, to catch on to things faster, because they're in this environment where they're going outside to do things. And, over here, it's just less popular. Maybe they play a sport and then it becomes their life. Because if you're a basketball player, you're a basketball player.
Yeah.
Where like when I was a kid, we'd play basketball, but then we'd play every other sport we could think of. So it wasn't like we were just basketball players and the life revolved around one thing. So it is like in these more like these third world things. Is that what you're saying? It's like they're better off.
They have let's say they have a more complete movement culture, and it's not just that their culture in general just doesn't coddle them the same way that our culture does, and it makes more robust people. We've professionalized youth sports, and we've gotten kids in some sense to adopt an identity around their sport.
It's a good way to put it. Professionalized kids sports.
It's widely talked about now. The professionalization of children's sports is widely talked about in educational circles and in sports science circles. Like a couple of my friends work for the Seattle Seahawks, and they're connected to kind of all the professional sports world here. And basically, the top coaches in professional and collegiate sports are trying to send the message down the chain that they don't want early specialization of athletes. Like they don't want a quarterback to come in who's been going to quarterback camps and doing nothing but quarterbacking and never playing another sport from the time he's 6 years old. Because what they find is that those athletes are far less adaptable and they're more fragile and they get broken earlier. But there's been this idea that's deeply rooted in the youth sports culture that it's all about specialization early. And more than that, there's more and more money in youth sports themselves and prestige. You know, coaches who take their AAU team and win a big championship with it, like those coaches are getting paid lots of money by the local thing. And so they're trying to squeeze every juice of talent out of that kid when they're 10 years old, instead of letting them build a wide base of physical capacity that's going to allow them to really excel at the next level. So, you know, Michael Tankovich, who's my student, who's a teacher, or he's an athletic trainer and physical therapist with the Seattle Seahawks, he was saying that some of his friends who are surgeons have found that are now seeing children as young as 11 years old for ulnar ligament replacements, what they call Tommy John surgery, right? Kids are blowing their arms out by the time they're 11 years old. Or worse than that, they're coming in to get preemptive Tommy John surgery because it increases velocity on their fastball.
Oh my God.
So this is what's happened to our culture. And, you know, I have this idea that just popped in my head that part of this is that we, like, you know, we're in this era of extraordinary political divisiveness. And one way to think about that is that there's no shared narrative that gives meaningful identity to people that's broadly shared across our culture anymore. Eric Weinstein calls it, you know, we lack a semi-coherent shared narrative. And so it's interesting when you talk about, you know, people are basketball players. It's like people are seeking something they can self-identify with. And in our self-identity is revolving around narrower and narrower pieces. Right? This is an idea that I published in a video called The Self-Worth Esteeming. I think that the whole campaign around self-esteem is kind of got it backwards. It's not that people, most people are not suffering because they lack self-esteem. They're suffering because there's actually just no self there to esteem. There's not a cultivated capacity for anything that person would actually admire. And without being capable of anything, without moving towards anything that you as an individual would admire, why would you esteem yourself?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So we've come to value ourselves off of capitalism. Works through specialization, and capitalism is a fantastic system that's had extraordinarily positive benefits for human beings in many, many ways. But it has downsides, and we haven't necessarily figured out good ways to deal with the downsides. One of those basic downsides is that capitalism is a system that optimizes for the production of capital. So anything that gets in the way of the production of capital, or that isn't valued as a form of capital, it tends to get pushed aside, right? So how much you love your children is not capturable in a monetary system, or it's very difficult to capture in a monetary system. My wife was talking to me about this recently. They've tried someone tried to calculate the monetary value to the economy of women breastfeeding their children. And it turns out that it's enormous, right? Because children who are breastfed have healthier teeth and jaws. They need less dental surgery. They end up with higher IQs. They're far less likely to get various diseases because of maternal immunity. And so all these things are like, those are all economic impacts, but then it's not measured well. It's not a direct generator of capital. So there's not a very good system to reward it. And if there's not a good system to reward it, that bad behavior will over time tend to get replaced by something that's easily measurable by the capitalist system. And the only measurement that matters within the capitalist system is that it generates a product or generates capital, right? It generates money. So I think that the fundamental problem is that we've created this system that produces more of everything, right? No system has ever successfully produced so much food to feed human beings. No system has ever produced so many houses that are warm and well insulated and will keep you safe, and so much clean water and electricity, and all these amazing benefits, and so many cool technologies, like we're currently talking over software via our insane machines.
Yeah.
But what powers that is not wasting effort on anything else, right? If your most productive way of producing capital is just to design computers, then essentially anything else you do in your life is wasted time from a capitalist standpoint, from a capital-based standpoint. The problem is that you then end up with like only a few things that are roots of self-worth for the individual. And basically, like, how much money you make is the fundamental one. And then the second one is the one that we sort of can't get rid of from human psychology, is how sexy are you?
Yeah.
But all these other traditional sources of self-worth, when it comes to like, are you devoted to God? Do you play music? Do you sing? Do you make beautiful food? Can you craft things? Do you make your own food? All of that, essentially, like, it becomes irrelevant. And without those sources of relevance and meaning, the individual is impoverished, and they just don't have enough self to esteem, to be worthy of. And then the same thing that I think is driving this, maybe some of this identification with, I'm a baller, I'm a soccer player, I'm a football player. It's like people are just grasping for anything that gives them a sense of self-worth, because what we are as human beings has been narrowed so tremendously by the system that we're in. So that's one of the ideas behind Evolve Move Play, is how do we start cultivating ourselves to be the type of human being that we would admire.
Right.
And we don't admire, I don't think we're very satisfied when we're very narrow human beings.
Yeah. So Evolve Move Play. What was your background before you started that, and then what about Evolve Move Play makes it your own and solves the problems that we've been talking about so far?
So I grew up as a kid who I grew up basically in a sort of hippie community, and I grew up at the end of a dirt road, and I had lots of access to nature. And so that, of course, was really fundamental. And then I started training martial arts when I was 6 years old. I was interested in ninjas and Jackie Chan and mostly like American Ninja and stuff when I was a kid, but Jackie Chan came later. And I was just inspired by that stuff when I was young. And then I had a mentor who came into my life when I was 8 years old, because I was ADHD and dyslexic, and I had to be taken out of school. And my next door neighbor volunteered to homeschool me. And one of the things that he did with me was he gave me a lot of chance to engage in rough and tumble play. And that was very healing for me. So there's something about rough and tumble play that I recognized at a very early age as being extremely valuable for people. So I had this interest in play, I had this interest in martial arts and movement from a very early age. And as I got into my teens, I became a mentor for younger children and did a lot of rough and tumble play with them. 15 years old, I started gymnastics and strength and conditioning and playing basketball a lot. 18, 19, I got more deeply into gymnastics. 21, I became a gymnastics teacher. It was also around the same time that I really started doing sort of functional fitness stuff, training with barbells and things like that. And then a couple years later, I discovered parkour. And for me, parkour was as if you had taken gymnastics and ripped a layer off and showed the primal roots underneath it. It was like the more vital version of the same thing. everything that I liked about gymnastics was like better expressed in parkour. So I had all these influences, and then at the same time I developed, so if we go back to being 8 years old again, this mentor who I had, he got me started with rough and tumble play. But the other thing that he did that really helped me overcome my learning disabilities was that he read epic literature to me. He read me The Lord of the Rings first, and then the Iliad and the Odyssey. And so by the end of the year, because I couldn't tolerate waiting to listen to the rest of the story, I had to be able to read. So I had been functionally illiterate, at least officially, and then I suddenly was reading these long adult novels, and I was reading the lives of the 12 Caesars and the Norse Eddas and Irish mythology. And from my interest in epic literature and mythology, I developed a very early interest in ethnography and anthropology. And I went to the local library when I was, say, approximately 12 years old. And over the next 2 years, I read every book on anthropology in the local library. And then I found another mentor who was in local government, and he had a library of, probably 30 to 60 ethnographies, because he had been he was an anthropologist. And I basically raided his library and read all his books. So by the time I was 14 years old, I was convinced that I was going to grow up and be a field anthropologist. So I had this element of movement. I also started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when I was 15, and kickboxing. And so I carried those forward as I go into my early 20s. So I was trained gymnastics. When I got a chance, I was sparring with people, even though I wasn't formally engaged in martial arts. And I was studying anthropology and evolutionary biology. And so when I discovered parkour, because I had that experience that I had essentially kind of like recognized something deeper and more primal, I started thinking back to how there was all these stories of feats of strength and feats of acrobatics in the stories of our heroes. That if you read the Irish literature about Cuchulainn and Finn McCool and Dermot Duvna, they're constantly doing feats like jumping over walls and running up trees and, balancing on the top of barrels as they go down cliffs and running up the side of a spear and standing on the point. And I started thinking that something about being a heroic individual was this expression of acrobatic and an ability to move through the world. Something was this ability to actually engage in physical combat. That was something that was very meaningful for human beings. And so there was an art out there that needed to be created that got to the heart of everything that was heroic, right? The hero's arts was the warrior's arts was my first sort of conception of this broad scale approach to human movement. And initially it was essentially gymnastics or acrobatics, parkour, and martial arts. And then I was influenced by CrossFit and got really into the idea of like strongman stuff and moving objects around. And I used to go train in the woods and pick up heavy rocks and carry them and throw them and lift them. So that was all in 2005, 2006. And then I started learning about Georges Hébert and the Méthode Naturelle, which was an older system that had incorporated all these elements already. He talked about 10 fundamental human capacities: walk, run, crawl, jump, climb, lift, carry, throw, balance, swim, and defend yourself. And he said that to be a fully cultivated human physically, you need to be competent across all these areas. And I learned about that initially through some articles by a guy named Artful Dodger, who was on the Urban Freestyle forums, which is the whole parkour thing. And then there was another guy who was really popularizing the idea of the natural movement within the parkour community. He came in a little bit later. He called himself Hebertiste. And that was Erwin LaCour, who went on to found MoveNet. And so he and I started communicating, and I started helping him with the creation of MoveNet. Again, that was 2007 really was when we started working together a lot. We co-taught the first sort of natural movement seminar at my family property in Skagit Valley in 2008. But he and I really just didn't jive. We didn't work well together, and our visions for what this should be were very different. He was very skeptical of the parkour community and the value of parkour. And I thought that there was a lot of profound shit and a lot of value happening with what was going on with parkour. And he wasn't interested in the play aspect of it. And I had been influenced by Frank Ferencich and was very interested in how play impacted movement. So that was kind of the story of it. And then, so when we parted ways, one of my complaints about what I had seen there was that I wanted to bring in a lot of subject matter experts to help strengthen the method, because I didn't think that either of us were yet that great at any of the above. Like I was a white belt in jiu-jitsu. I was a good white belt in jiu-jitsu, but I was a white belt in jiu-jitsu. And I felt like fundamentally I was a white belt in parkour, and I was a white belt in everything. And it's like you're trying to create this generalist system and share it with the world, but you're not yet great at any of the things. And it's like, do you have the authority to speak to any of these things at this stage? And I didn't perceive Erwan as having skill that was beyond what I had in teaching experience. And so I thought, if I want to create this, what I need to do is I need to choose one of these arts and embed myself in it very deeply. And then, and then when you become master of one tool, you can then understand the path to mastery and start applying those lessons to many other tools. And so when I then taught parkour for 2008 to 2013, I was really focused on teaching parkour through Parkour Visions, which was a parkour facility that I co-founded in Seattle. And all the time I was slowly building up my ideas around the rest of what I wanted my natural movement approach to be. And I was starting martial arts classes in the gym, and I was teaching strength and conditioning in the gym. And I was beginning to explore my acrobatics again. And then it kind of the situation with the parkour gym between me and the co-founder, it became toxic, and it was time for me to step away from that. And that was when I decided to create Evolvement Play. So that's the history. And then you asked, what was the other question? Something about what is my... Go ahead.
And how does your method now address the problems that we were talking about? The difference between like the third world countries being good at things, they're tougher, or like the in Brazil, the capoeira, they're able to do any other sport. And so like, how is your system?
Okay, so
that problem?
Okay, so there's a number of kind of answers to that question. It's a really interesting thing. So let's look at parkour just as a natural experiment, because I think parkour itself actually contains a lot of the answer. Parkour started in the late 80s in France with a small group of kids, and then basically in the late 90s it started spreading, but it didn't really start spreading to the Anglophone world until the early 2000s. Like I found it in 2005, and in 2005 I bet there was not more than 100 people in all of the US who were practicing. Like I can only name, say, 4 or 5 people that I know who are training before me. So I was one of the very early adopters of parkour. So let's say that parkour has been like broadly available for like 10 years, really, 10 to 13 years. In that time, the skill level in parkour has climbed astronomically. If you compare parkour to the two arts that are most similar to it, that'd be track and field and gymnastics. So parkour athletes now are jumping distances that are comparable to the distances that are being jumped in track and field. So the best athletes I know of in parkour can do 20 plus foot running gap jumps. Okay. Now, an elite track and field athlete can do a 27, 28 foot running broad jump, but they're going to land on their butt in a sand pit. So I believe that if you took any of the top parkour athletes like Kai Willis or Callum Powell or Phil Doyle, and you gave them a year of training in track and field, they would be competitive national level long jumpers. And on the flip side, if you look at the acrobatics development in parkour, the elite guys in parkour now are doing as many flips and spins as you're seeing elite guys in gymnastics doing. But you have to realize that they're doing this off of bars that are not perfectly designed, that are inconsistent. They're doing it on concrete. They're doing it on grass. So one of my former students, Nathan Weston, recently put a video of him doing a double-double laid out. So, or not laid out, double-double tucked. So he did 2 flips with 2 full twists. He did this off of a metal bar that he's attached to 2 trees. And he has a thin mattress on dirt that he's doing this on, right? And this is a trick, that elite gymnasts compete. Male gymnasts are going to do it laid out. Female gymnasts are going to do it tucked a lot of the times at the Olympics. Like that's the level of it. Nate's done a triple backflip. Like basically nobody competes something higher than that. Jared Nahulu, I believe, has done laid out double, right? So in 10 years, basically, parkour athletes have achieved levels of skills that are comparable to the best athletes in gymnastics and track and field. That's astounding. And it's more astounding when you realize there's basically no talent cultivation system in these arts, right? There's no coaches, right? Nate was my student for 6 months. He's taught himself almost everything that he knows. Jared comes out of the Apex movement system, which is a very good system, but he's not being supervised by a teacher 40 hours a week, which is what's happening in gymnastics or with high-level track and field athletes. They don't train quite as much as gymnasts, but they're with a coach, and the coach has a specific pedagogy, and these pedagogies are like gymnastics' pedagogy has been under development for 400 years. So parkour has discovered something about how human beings learn that is not being respected properly, really, in these other arts, because there's no way that elite parkour athletes should be as close to elite gymnasts and track and field athletes in performance, right? Nobody in parkour is using PEDs, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have they're not getting paid lots of money to do this. They're not training 40 hours a week for the most part. How the hell are they reaching this level of performance? Fundamentally, I think that it's because a lot of the coaching that we do is actually getting in people's way. We're actually teaching in ways that are contrary to the motor learning system's natural development. And what parkour has done is actually removed barriers to people's inherent learning system. Parkour is play-based, it's open-ended, it's organic, and it's self-organized. And because of that, athletes are able to learn more rapidly. So what Evolve Move Play is actually an attempt to say, can we gain the benefit of a teacher who understands these things and is able to manipulate the situation to facilitate this type of learning even more powerfully? So when I was teaching parkour, I came in with my gymnastics background, and I was very good at creating linear progressions. And that was kind of my claim to fame in the parkour community, was that I could look at a problem in the development of parkour skill and break it down into pieces and give people drills to build it up. When I took my movement teaching and I started teaching only in nature, what happened was I had this expectation of I will introduce this movement. People will make this set of mistakes. I will give them these drills and these cues, and I will fix the set of mistakes, and then we'll move on. And what happened was that they stopped making most of the mistakes. So I would introduce something and then stand there for a long time feeling lost because I thought that I wasn't able to do my job as a coach, because I thought my job was like interfering with every step of the process of the athlete. But I was just watching and observing. I was like, well, if they're learning the thing without me teaching it to them, then don't get in their way. So then I started experimenting with teaching even less, with stepping back and not even saying, do this movement, just saying, move through this space and play in this space. And then what do you learn? And now all of a sudden, without even introducing a specific movement, people would self-organize it. People would a classic movement is a step vault, or a movement I call it a tripod step through. You have one hand on an object, one foot on an object, and you move your leg in between the hand and foot. So people will, we spent a lot of time on this in the early days of parkour, putting people on the ground and having them do this movement pattern over and over again. What I found is that if you ask people to move around in trees, they do the movement. And then you can give them small cues to help them improve the performance of the movement. And you can help them start understanding the principles of why they're moving in that way. It's like, you're already figuring this out. Why are you doing it? What is the purpose of it? And when you do that, the speed at which people acquire the movement is so much faster. So it's essentially like, what we're trying to do is understand the inherent motor learning system, and then ask ourselves, first of all, how do we not get in the way? Like, I think as a teacher, you should adopt the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. Like, people will learn if you just give them permission and a space to try things. And some love, some genuine sort of like care. That's one of the most profoundly empowering things that you can do. So first, do no harm. Don't be a dick, and don't make the process about you, and don't feed the athlete information that's actually going to get in the way of their performance of the skill. And then ask yourself, okay, is there something that I can add that's positive? Is there a moment of the athlete's struggle that I can give them something that's going to give them a little bit of a hint to open this next door? And you always got to be careful with that, because sometimes the hint that helps them open this door makes them more dependent on you and less able to open the next door for themselves. But that's the art that we're cultivating as far as the teaching is. First, understand how the person learns and the power of the self-organized learning. And then ask, how do I amplify this process without interfering with it? And I think we've been really successful with that. The speed at which I see my students learning skills, it astounds me sometimes. And people who come to me who totally are afraid of parkour and don't expect to do it, they'll get trapped, they'll get wrapped up in the play, and they'll fall into the flow state because of the way that we've constructed these task-oriented games. And all of a sudden they'll be doing things that they never expected. I recently had a really profound experience of that with incorporating some dance elements into my parkour teaching. It just happened to hit really well for this particular group of students. And there was this moment where, like, my expectation about what they would get out of the drill was so vastly surpassed by what actually happened that I had to just step back and watch them do their thing, because like it was going so well that I couldn't conceive of any way that I could add to the process that wouldn't take away from it. So I just let them play it out. And I watched people have so much flow and so much connection in the movement, so much confidence in trying out movements. And then they came to me afterwards, and especially this group of girls, they were like, they didn't necessarily come to do natural parkour because it was a mixed seminar. And they said, like, look, we were afraid of parkour, and we never thought that we were going to like try a Kong vault and do these things. But once you had the rhythm and the play and the connection and the energy of the group, it was like it just happened. So this is what we're trying to do is cultivate that and make it a little bit more. We're trying to abstract out what's so beneficial about these organic processes, like you see with the parkour capoeira kids in Brazil, like you see with the parkour kids all over the world, and say, how do we apply enough of a systematic approach to help people gain the most important benefits at the right time, without interfering with the process. So going back to the story, I had one of my students, Michael Tankovich, who I mentioned earlier, who said to me, "Are you familiar with dynamic systems theory?" Because he was watching the way that I taught. And I said, no. And so he started explaining to me that basically this whole idea of using tasks to constrain learning processes and paying close attention to the cues that actually work and not trying to overcoach, it's all being elucidated within this area of dynamic systems theory as applied to movement. Because dynamic systems theory is a much bigger thing. It's a very big thing in ecology and all these other areas. But as applied to movement, it's this, and this is related to also motor learning theory. So, I started then researching that and reading. There's a book called Strength Coordination Integrated Approach by Franz Bosch. So I read that book. Next on my list is Nikolai Bernstein, and so we've been studying this understanding of what the movement is. So anyways, I think I got off on a little bit of a tangent because I was really passionate about this particular question of how we get people to move better. But maybe the question you had was even bigger, which is how is evolved movement play answering all these other questions that we had? Is that true?
Right. Yeah. With the you can follow that train of thought, whatever you're just on. But I was also thinking of getting back to the housing and how it seems like maybe now a lot of parents are not wanting their kids to like wrestle around, or they don't want, like, they see their like wrestling with their friends. Oh, stop that! Don't do that. You're gonna hurt each other or something like that. And of course, you don't want it to get too out of hand. And I'm teaching kids, and like a couple of them, probably my two like top students that have been with me the longest. It's brother and sister. Sister's 13, the brother is 10, and they have their junior black belts in karate, and sometimes they do jujitsu with me. Also, I teach a jujitsu class at White Pine, and so like we were at class the other day, and they're wanting to punch me in the stomach, so I'm letting them do that, and then she wants me to punch her. So she's 13, and she wants me to punch her in the stomach, and so I'm punching her in the stomach. Of course, I'm not like as hard as I can, because that would be like abusive, really inappropriate for me to just blast her. Like, but I think it's also inappropriate for me to not punch her in the stomach when she's asking for it, because we're laughing and she's showing me how tough she is, and she is tough and strong, and so I'm punching her in the stomach at a point where I think is okay. Didn't get hurt, didn't knock the wind out of her or anything, and so I've seen in your writing, and I think it was like you're writing about like the rats, like as long as the weaker rat. Do you want to explain the rat thing, and then?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is some research by a guy named Jaak Panksepp, and I initially encountered it through the work of Stuart Brown, who has a book called Play that's very, very worthwhile for anyone who's thinking about these things. But the basic observation was that with competitive play, animals and children who are well socialized will self-handicap. They make it so that both players are successful frequently enough that the game is engaging. And the finding with the rats was that basically, if the larger rat doesn't allow the smaller rat to win at least 30% of the time, then that rat will stop inviting play. So the way that I like to think about this is that essentially we're all sort of biologically and inherently driven to play. This is another thing that Panksepp found. There's a reward circuitry in the brain that's specifically sort of developed around rough and tumble play. So this is something that's so important to us that evolution built a kind of specific circuitry in the brain to get us to do it. And there's research on monkeys that show that animals will engage in play even at a cost to their growth. So it's so important that you will play even when it will put you at a calorie deficit that will prevent you from growing as fast as you could. So when you put these little rats in there and you give them a chance to play, and they have to do some work to play, they'll work very hard. They'll show very high motivation in order to get access to play. You let them play, the bigger rat will win the first time. If it's 10% bigger, it will win the first time every time. You let them play repeatedly, and what you find is that the bigger rat, if he doesn't allow the smaller rat to win at least 30% of the time, the smaller rat will stop inviting play. So we're highly motivated to play. But if we're not successful frequently enough, then we start experiencing the play as negative. And so people end up being essentially operantly conditioned against engaging in the activity. And this is actually one of the fundamental problems, I think, with the professionalization of sports. We take kids at 5 years old, 6 years old, and we put them in a rule-bound game where they don't have the opportunity to really self-handicap, and where the object is to win, not to prolong the game. And it's imposed by adults. And what's going to happen is that essentially there's always going to be some of the kids who are not successful enough to be positively rewarded by that experience, and we're burning those kids out. We're telling them sports are not for you. And then we take the kids who were successful enough and we move them up into a more competitive situation, and we burn some of those kids up. And we just keep repeating that until by the time kids reach high school, like even the kids who are saying like the 90th percentile, a lot of them are burned out and tired and don't feel like engaging in sport is fun anymore, and they don't want to do it anymore. And so we have the most sedentary culture in the world, and we ask ourselves why. And it's like, well, we're punishing people for engaging in movement because we don't understand play and we don't understand how it works. So this idea of the 30% rule is basically, if you want an optimal learning environment, if you want people to be able to gain the benefits of any sort of physical game or any sort of physical endeavor, you need to make sure that they feel safe enough to engage in it. You need to make sure that they feel like they have a chance of success often enough that it'll continue to be engaging. And they could still be losing 70% of the time, potentially. You know, I think there's variations of character. Like I think some people can handle losing a lot, and some people are more sensitive and really feel like they need to be successful a lot. I think most of the good jiu-jitsu guys, for instance, are capable of like one win out of 1,000 being a win. You know what I mean? But I think a lot of people who could benefit from jiu-jitsu don't, because they go in and they get tapped and they get tapped and they get tapped and they get tapped and they get tapped, and they never experience something that looks like success enough to keep them engaging. It's fun at first, but then it's not safe enough, and they don't have success, and then they get burned out. It seemed great, but it ended up not being rewarding. And it's not that the thing couldn't be rewarding for them. It's that they were essentially operantly conditioned against it before they got a chance to get good enough for it to be rewarding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. When I'm teaching, and I started jiu-jitsu about 20 years ago, but I don't consider myself a high-level teacher.
Yeah.
And when I'm having like newer people, or even if I'm training with somebody like the 13-year-old girl that I was just talking about, sometimes she'll train with us, and if you watch us fighting, she's winning most of the time. I'm going to hold her down. She's going to escape. She's going to do something. I'll get some reversals and stuff, but it's going to look like she's winning most of the time, and then she'll end up choking me out or something. So I'm trying to teach people how to win, but there's also you also build that up, and then, or if I'm training more, especially more adults, then because I don't openly teach kids jiu-jitsu. I just like family, and a couple of them, they have their junior black belts in karate, like I said, so they get it. And it's when I'm training adults, I want them to learn how to win, and then after they get good enough, then I make them suffer. I'm going to put my solar plexus on their nose and mouth. I'm going to suffocate them, and it's going to start getting more and more miserable. And then they escape more and more miserable situations. And then, so when you're doing maybe could you describe some of the roughhousing games that you play, and how does that philosophy come in, where I could come in, I'm not as tough as you, but I can still win? And
so we're trying to achieve a sense of safety in the games that we start with. And we're trying to achieve to make the game such that it's likely that both participants have a chance to succeed. So one of the first games we play is a game called it's King of the Log. So we have people standing on a narrow surface, and they're attached at the hand, and the goal is to make the other guy off balance and step down. So the reason that this game works really well, and basically everybody that we've ever introduced it to had fun, even people who are very intimidated by martial arts or feel like they're not competitive people. The reason that it works is because it's just the hands manipulating themselves. There's no real fear involved. It's not scary. their level of safety is high. And then because we take away the balance, that actually takes away a lot of the advantage of being bigger, because a bigger person has a higher moment of sway. So it's actually more challenging generally for bigger people to hold their balance. So a smaller person can overcome some of the advantages that a larger person has in their size by having a better balance, right? You're shorter, your center of mass is lower, you're not as wide when you're standing on a narrow surface, then your moment is decreased. And so in this way, we end up with a game where, everybody kind of feels like they have a chance of success. And also it's novel. And any game that's novel, you don't know yet whether you're going to dominate it yet. So if we play this game over and over and over again, then we're going to start seeing that some people are going to win every time, are going to win a lot, and some people are going to start not winning at all. And those people aren't going to enjoy the game very much. But because it's new and it's safe, people are able to engage intensely in competition, and they really enjoy it. So then we're always sort of working on this scale of like, you want to limit the game in such a way that, so there's actually two elements to the way that we're teaching rough and tumble play. Well, more than that, but when we're thinking about it as like a competitive, like martial arts orientation, there's the element of aliveness, which is how can I, as early as possible, give you a chance to compete intensely by making it safe enough and giving you enough of a chance of success that it's going to be fun and engaging for you. And then at the same time, how do I introduce you to the skills that are going to be more powerful at higher levels of the game or real martial arts situations in a way that's scaled enough for you to do them safely. So we start there, and then we can add in, okay, the next degree of freedom is like just using both hands and not having the hands connected. So now you have to deal with more things. And then we can start scoring by touching each other on the chest. So you could add a target to touch. So we can introduce a lot of the dynamics of striking without striking hard, right? Yeah. And we can invent ways to control that, and without striking at high value targets. So rather than teaching someone to punch and punch and punch and punch and punch, and then asking them to try and throw a punch at somebody's head and having no control of their level of force, as often happens in martial arts, we spend a lot of time cultivating people's ability to play intelligently and to recognize the set of limitations within which they're going to feel safe and successful. And then what we do is slowly introduce them to more and more complex games that are going to look more and more like being able to actually fight. And that's half of what we do, because we also have this whole contact improvisation aspect of it. We do that first. We start with games that have no competitive intent at all, that are about learning to communicate effectively through movement. And this building of rapport with movement partners is really valuable when you do move into the competitive aspect, because now you have a much better connection, and the trust in a relationship is a lot of what allows you to have a good sparring relationship with somebody. So the contact improv works for that. And then it also develops a lot of movement intelligence. So when you play in an open way and without competition, it's easy to explore lots of spaces. As soon as you add competition, the optimal set of strategies is going to be more limited. And so you're actually going to be training people to limit their behavior. The problem with that is that then if you don't have enough ways to challenge them, then they end up becoming weak in areas. So by giving them something that's totally open and where they don't have a lot of competitiveness, they end up exploring all the different ways that the body can interrelate with another body. So lifts in contact improv a lot of them are essentially martial arts throws. But then there are lots of lifts that you do in contact improv that are not martial arts throws, because you just never end up in that situation with somebody else's body. Mm-hmm. But the cool thing is that if you have that openness, you can be more creative, and you can see opportunities in places that you wouldn't if you only trained the most fundamental things that actually work in combat. So a lot of times in combat sports, you'll see that the athletes who are able to retain a sort of adaptive creativity are the ones who change the game. They start seeing opportunities that nobody else saw. And so this contact improv stuff does that. On top of that, though, rough and tumble play, I think about it a lot through the lens of martial arts because I've been a martial artist since I was 6 years old, and I like martial arts, and I'm fascinated by violence. But it's really a mistake to see rough and tumble play as primarily rehearsal for fighting, or that the value of, say, contact improvisation is what it teaches you about, like, having openness for fighting. Fundamentally, rough and tumble play actually is probably more valuable in the sense that it builds behavioral flexibility and the capacity to regulate emotion, negotiate, and communicate effectively. And these rough and tumble, both the cooperative aspects of these games and the competitive aspects of this game are incredibly powerful for developing those abilities. Develop how fast can you read somebody, how well can you communicate with somebody physically, how well can you listen to someone's physical signal, how sensitive can you be, how well can you regulate your emotional response to somebody moving your body and recognize somebody else's emotional response to you moving their body. All those are fundamental to communication in a much broader way and to self-knowledge in a much broader way. And that's probably the most profound aspect of these things, actually, far more than their impact on being able to fight, because most people don't actually have a necessity to be able to fight.
Right.
But that's kind of how we go about introducing these things. We start with games that we derive from the contact improv community. And well, it's more like the idea of contact improv. The first interaction I had with some sort of contact improvisation was just a random game that was created out of Parkour Jam, where we started pushing each other into obstacles, and then you had to create a flow and come out of it and push somebody else into the obstacle. And then I started playing with contact as a way to create aliveness and movement for a long time before I ended up interacting with any contact improv. But then I started learning from Shiri Aziv from the Athletic Playground, and I did some contact improv with her, and I learned some basic theories of ways that you can move with another body through contact improv, and also through my friend Morgan Houghton. And then I started taking those and applying them in this context of my work. And I've just found it to be enormously beneficial, like I said, for the development of all the things on the competitive side, but also for all these aspects of movement sensitivity, communication, negotiation, empathy. And that's what the research on rough and tumble play says as well, is that it's one of these fundamental ways in which we develop a lot of social intelligence. So another long rant.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's like have people go on there as long of a monologue about what it is, because the whole idea is to like really dig deep into the philosophy and whatever train of thought you end up on, feel free to take it, because oftentimes people will like I may not have a question, but I'll have like a story, and then they answer the story because that sparks something. So it's not like I had this like list of questions for you. It's I have like some in my mind, and then I want to see what you say, and then I'll relay. Sure. And it's like people often, it's kind of neat how it's been working out that way. So when you were talking like before the show about some things that you're wanting to get to, I didn't remember exactly what you were calling it. They were like more like I think more like scientific kind of like terms, like the cognitive like behaviors stuff is.
So I said there's kind of three things that we could talk about. One, we talked about a little bit, which is the dynamic systems theory stuff, right? The motor learning theory and how all this kind of like approach to teaching works and why we think it's so powerful. And then the other one was the question of meaning and like, why should we really practice? And I thought that would be interesting to your audience because of their kind of the idea of your podcast is around fitness and consciousness. And then I don't remember what the last one was. I had the third one, but it's fled my head.
Yeah, I might think of it in a second. It's like I kind of like have the gist of it in my mind, but I don't know. I didn't put it as articulately as you did at the beginning, but I'll probably remember in a minute if you don't.
Sounds good.
Uh,
Go ahead.
so when you're like the meaning behind it, and we've dug into that. So like, what do you see as like what's next? Like what are you see on the horizon? Like what are you trying to like add to your system or better understand that you can?
Yeah.
And well, one thing I was thinking of is just how well you articulate your system and how you have it. You word things very well, which is something that I'm working on for my own system and my own things that I do. Some of it is very similar in thought to what you have. I'm not doing what you're doing exactly, but there's a lot of overlap, but distinctions also. But like, what do you see as like what's next for? I guess just what's next for you, or how that you're going to add to your system.
Let's see. There's areas that I'm researching, I guess. The last sort of year, I was really researching the question of why. Like, why do we practice at all? How do we get the right motivation to practice? Because if we're not motivated, then we won't practice and we won't gain the benefits of practice. I think that this question of what our fundamental whys is very poorly articulated in the movement community and the fitness community. So I was really inspired by the work of Jordan Peterson and his work on meaning and how we map out meaning.
I'm a big fan of his too.
Yeah. And so I incorporated a lot of that and studied deeply in that. And then I suppose, I'm still studying that deeply and still incorporating those insights into my teaching. And now I feel like I've moved more towards my interest as far as in what I'm teaching is more physical now. It's more about I'm particularly interested in how do I take people now from an introductory level of competence in movement to refining the higher levels of movement competence into understanding what these things are. So like I said, we have this kind of general approach where we start with creative exploration, right? Rather than saying, I'm going to teach you X, Y, and Z technique. I put you in a situation where you need to move in ways that you're not used to moving. And I give you the permission to play with that space. And I found this very empowering for people. And people will start generating lots of smart movements. It's like, you're a human being. There's only so many ways for you to solve getting over a tree branch. And you'll start figuring out most of the ways if you just get an opportunity. And then what we do is we actually like to now start teaching at a principle-based level. Like, I think this is the fundamental thing about higher level teaching is it's understanding the underlying principles that allow success and being able to elucidate those effectively for students. And most teaching is stuck at this level of atomizing skills and just trying to teach people a list of skills. But I look at that as like giving people a tool belt, but not teaching them carpentry. It's just not that useful. You need to teach them what they're trying to achieve. And so we're trying to really articulate what flow is, what effective movement is from within our little sphere of movement. And then we go from, okay, once we've introduced these concepts of how to move, we go into how to use specific movements and how those movements help you fulfill the principles, right? So you have a hammer because you need to hit a nail to create an attachment between two pieces of wood, right? That's what that's for. Now, so you need to understand what the purpose of the tools is. You have to have the principles, and the principles for me are, when we're talking about moving through the environment, the principles are you need to be able to control rhythm, right? You need to be able to control your displacement up and down off the ground, the direction of your inertia, how you're moving side to side, and whether your movement is in the direction that you want to go. And then you need to be able to control the structure of your body. Are you optimizing biomechanical positions? And then are you able to move through more difficult positions while staying in optimal power generation? And then there's how do you make the right decisions about how to move through the environment. There's assessment of the environment and orienting effectively and making good choices. And then there's the perceptual system, which of course is related to that. But can we train the perceptual system to be better able to resolve the environment faster? So if you're looking at a course, if you're going to jump over one object, right, and then you're going to jump over a second object behind it. If you jump over this one and your eyes are focused on this for a long time, and then they have to focus on your feet landing, and there's a perceptual lag before your eyes can focus on this. And your nervous system is not going to allow you to continue to move fast towards this if it can't perceive where it is. So it's not just a matter of how much force you can produce on the ground, the effectiveness of your movement between these spaces. It's also about how well you're able to distribute your attention between the elements in the environment, hold a map of that environment in your head, and apply your perceptual system to give you the most important information at the right time as you're moving through it. So if you're going over this object and your eyes hard focus on this object at the wrong time, that will hurt you. So perceptual errors are actually a major problem within movement flow. So what we're interested in right now, what I'm interested in is, okay, so if we've created this schema and we've started to help people recognize when they're making errors in different arenas, right? Is this an error that has to do with lack of control of rhythm? Is this an error that has to do with lack of control of direction or displacement? Is this and now we're looking, okay, is your perceptual system working correctly? Are you hard focusing on this object? Are you distributing your attention effectively? So now the research is, how do we get better and better at controlling and challenging people to get better in these areas? So if we want to get people better at rhythm, how do we get them to pay attention to the rhythm better in a way that doesn't interfere with their motor processing too much? So actually, this is something where we're bringing in elements from dance, because if you can start moving in a way that responds to the rhythm of dance, you start recognizing that movements through a course are a series of beats, and your ability to control that series of beats has a lot to do with what makes you efficient. So you can play with music, you can play with different types of beats, you can play with different relationships to the beats as you move through the course. So we're researching different ways to do that. And then there's, you can work on ways to disrupt rhythm and make people recover rhythm. And this is an idea that I actually got from a conversation I had with Josef Frusic from Fighting Monkey. It was kind of something that I was maybe already playing with, but talking to him about it really helped me crystallize this idea. So every time that you disrupt somebody's rhythm and make them reclaim the rhythm, then you're forcing them to essentially make that adaptation, right? So we are playing with things like, wrestling before someone gets to a run. So if someone has a run up to a jump or a run up to a vault prior to their attempt to run up, we're going to disturb their rhythm by having somebody move them around. We're taking away people's ability to decide when they initiate a course, so that they have to create a rhythmic coordination that much quicker. So for instance, if you're traditionally in parkour, this is one of the areas where I think parkour is weak, and where evolvement play has added some very useful additions to the parkour method. You're looking at a course, and you're going to look and say, okay, maybe I have 4 steps before the course, or maybe I have 5 steps before the course. And you're going to plan out how those steps are going to go. And so you have this volitional control of each step that goes into the thing. And if the steps don't work, then a lot of times the athlete will stop and reset, and they're not forced to be adaptive. So what we'll do is we'll say, you might have someone start walking away from the object they're going to go over, and then somebody else says, go, and they have to turn around and sprint. So they don't ever get a chance to decide precisely where it starts. Rather, once they turn around and go, it's not their volitional nervous system anymore. It's the reflexive nervous system, which is really what we want to train. So as they're walking away, we turn around and they run up to the thing. So now they have to turn, recognize with the perceptual system, formulate a plan. All of this happens subcognitively. It's way too fast to happen cognitively. And then they end up steering that. So you do that repeatedly over and over again, and they're going to get better at that ability to to reflexively control the rhythmic structure of running prior to doing a vault. With the perceptual system, that's actually an area where I've become very interested in the application of acrobatics. Right? Acrobatics disturb the perceptual system. If you're in the middle of a course of running, jumping, and vaulting, and you have to do a flip in it, when you land, your head is bouncing, right? Your eyes are disoriented. They have to now seize on what's in the environment faster. If you're spinning, you've got disorientation of the vestibular system. If the athlete is better at recapitulating their ability to control the rhythm and to recognize what's in the environment, having come out of that acrobatic element, then that's actually a really powerful way to teach them to have a better perceptual system. We're also doing all sorts of drills where we play with what the eyes are doing, and we start learning to control the ability of the eye to slide across the horizon and to fix on different points and do that more rapidly. So that's the areas of big research right now. We have a schema now for what is effective flow, which is something that I haven't really seen many other people articulate within parkour or natural movement. And then now we're going in and saying, okay, if these are the elements, what are the ways in which we can challenge the athlete to help them self-organize more effectively along those particular lines of study? So that's the big area in my teaching that I'm particularly interested in right now.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. You reminded me of so we played different games. Where I teach, kids will carry a kettlebell across the yard, while a couple other kids are shooting at them with foam arrows.
Yeah.
So they're trying to get across and back without getting hit with the arrows, and so you see, and it ends up being funny. Everybody's laughing, and so they get some momentum. They have to stop. Well, the kettlebell is still trying to go, and then it's that's kind of what you reminded me of, this kind of interrupted rhythm, and yeah, you definitely have a unique way of going about things, and it's so Matt at White Pine is also copying a lot of your games, like the one where we have a 2x4 out flat and pulling and trying to push each other off, and so I'm about out of questions. I mean, I'm not in any rush, but do you have is there anything else you're wanting to get into, or?
Yeah, I just wanted to give people a little breakdown on where they can kind of find my work.
Yes.
So my website's evolvedmoveplay.com. My Facebook page is Rafe Kelley Movement. I'm on Instagram, Rafe Kelley again, and YouTube, Rafe Kelley, or Evolve Move Play. Both channels are available. And I have seminars coming up all over the world. A big one that I would really encourage people to come to. If they're in the States, they want to come to Return to the Source. Really, we already have people coming from the UK and Iceland as well. But Return to the Source is August 3rd through the 10th. That's really the deepest experience that I can give, because it's called Return to the Source because it's the sources of my practice. It's the places where I've built my practice. If you've been watching my videos and you've seen sprawling cedar trees where I jump from branch to branch, we're going to be training that on the first day. If you've seen the big, beautiful sandstone boulders that are carved by the winds and the rain and make these crazy shapes, that's Larrabee State Park. We'll be there on the second day. If you've seen the climb through the waterfall and the beautiful jumps on the logs in the woods and the cliff diving spots and the beautiful rocks on the creek, that's Welcome Falls Park, and that's where we'll be on the fourth day and the sixth day. And then we're going to go on the fifth day to Mount Baker, which is a beautiful space where we're going to go play in snow and swim in alpine lakes, which is one of my first places that I really loved exploring natural movement in the summer. And then on the last day, we're going to go to Discovery Park, which is kind of one of my main training areas now, which is a crazy sandstone beach, a beautiful set of sand bluffs that we slide down, and some amazing trees as well. So each day is a combination of natural parkour, moving in the environment and practicing skills that help us move from place to place in the environment, all the stuff we talked about with flow. And then we'll also be doing the contact improv and roughhousing, as well as joint integrity and body health maintenance and meditation and sort of soft qigong style movement. On the third day, we'll take a lighter day to give people's bodies a little bit of rest. That day we will stay on the family property, and we will practice cold immersion and meditation and joint integrity and also some wilderness skills. So we'll be working on making fire, tracking, and harvesting wild berries. That time of year where there's a ton of wild berries, blueberries, salmon berries, raspberries, black caps, and wild blackberry. I think I said blackberries. Yeah, lots of very, very beautiful things. So that's kind of the shape of the thing. And then we stay at in my family homestead, where we have this beautiful house. You guys can look up Rafe Kelley if you're interested, and see the house we're going to stay in. It's called the Garden House. It's a crazy place. We have a wood-fired sauna, cold plunges, just a ton of incredibly beautiful stuff there. And let's see, what else do I need to tell you about that? Oh yeah, it's room and board and transportation once you get to the initial site, and we'll be feeding you guys local organic food from farmers in the Skagit Valley in Whatcom County. It's amazing food, amazing experience. What we found is that this type of work that we do, classes are good and short workshops are good, but there's nothing like being immersed in it for a full week. The way that the tribe comes together over the course of the week creates this sort of psychological support that lets all the inhibitions fall out for people, and they're able to step over their own limitations in movement by leaps and bounds in a way that you just can't experience with anything else that I've seen. So I highly recommend that event to anybody. If you're in Europe, we're going to be taking an event exactly like that into Europe, into southern Spain in a place called Tarifa, the European Movement Intensive. That's going to be exactly the same format, and we're going to be exploring the Alcornales National Park. And that's going to be a really amazing experience as well. So if folks are interested in my work, those are great. And then we also have 2-day seminars coming up all around the world, and people can find that on my website, evolvingplay.com.
Yeah, sounds really amazing. I would love to get a chance to go out there and spend the week. I'm gonna try to make that happen. It sounds awesome.
That'd be great to have you. And
yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know there was a lot of people that I were talking to, but I was telling you were going to be on. They were really excited to hear it. And so, do you have any other closing words of wisdom or anything for us?
Go play outside.
That's a good way to wrap it up. That's perfect. So, Rafe Kelley, thank you very much. And I'll stop the recording, and I'll talk to you for a second when we stop the recording.